Well, for those of us watching around the world, a huge welcome to everyone. The time has just gone 7 p.m. in South Africa, 8 p.m. in Israel, and a big welcome to an enormous audience that we have joining us this evening. A reminder to those people, at some point in time, our Zoom will be full, in which case, please refer your friends and family to go onto YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, where we're broadcasting live as well. If you're watching us on YouTube, please, we ask a favor, please click the like and subscribe buttons that you'll see on YouTube. That just helps us and allows us to communicate with you a little easier, so you can get better notifications about the remarkable webinars that we run at the South African Jewish Report. Tonight is, in fact, the 169th webinar that we've run since the start of COVID. Originally, this was going to be a one-off webinar to give people medical advice about how to deal with COVID and how we've changed and morphed over the last, 4 years since COVID actually began. But it's a huge, great privilege for us to be talking to you this evening. And if you are watching us from around the world, we'd love to know where you actually are. I see people have joined us from Haifa in Israel, from Cape Town, from Beit Shemesh, from London, from Beverly Hills. We have people watching us in Mauritius, Constantia, Switzerland. It really is a remarkable, fantastic audience. So a welcome to everyone. And please, as always, remember that tonight is a conversation. It's just not Michael and myself and Miri, it's you as well. So we want you, whether you're watching us on Zoom, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, use the chat, use the Q&A, ask questions, participate, comment as we go, and let's have a real, genuine conversation about all of this. We're also so happy that this evening we are partnering together with the Jewish National Fund, who do such remarkable work in South Africa and Israel as well. So we'd like to just play you a quick 4-minute video about the sort of work that the JNF actually do, and everyone can turn off their videos for 4 minutes. Miri and Mike, let's actually watch this video, and then we're going to come back, do a little housekeeping, and then we've got a remarkable evening planned for everyone. So a big welcome to everyone watching us around the world.
The JNF have been involved in South Africa for over 100 years. And in that 100 years, we have made a tremendous difference to the establishment of the State of Israel.
Thanks to the support of South African Jewry, we've been able to build forests, roads, dams, and lead to the development of the State of Israel into a modern, dynamic society.
Some of our flagship projects in Israel are the Brecha Trail, which is an educational walking trail through the Carmel Forest. There's the South African Memorial Forest, which commemorates South African soldiers that fell defending Israel, and our bomb shelter projects, which have saved lives.
Historically, JNF has been associated with planting trees in the land of Israel, and we still continue to do that, but we're now doing so much more. We're bringing Israeli water and agricultural technology to South Africa to help improve the lives of people here and ensure water and food security.
Our major flagship project here in South Africa is our project in Mamelodi. It's the Walter Sisulu Environmental Centre, as well as another environmental centre in Hammersdale in KwaZulu-Natal. It's wonderful to see the impact that the JNF has made on communities here and how perceptions of Israel are being changed.
Everyone knows the functions that we organize in South Africa, the fundraising that we do for Israel, and the bond that we are creating between the South African Jewish community and the land of Israel.
The JNF provides an incredible opportunity for the youth to get involved, to be doing something different and to be a part of something that is bigger than yourself. Through our educator seminars where we send teachers to Israel, through bringing our shlichim into the schools to learn more about the land of Israel, through our cool hikes and picnics, there is something for everyone.
Recently, in partnership with the base, we brought returned hostage Sapir Cohen to South Africa, and she told the community of her harrowing story of spending 55 days in captivity at the hands of Hamas. We've also organized solidarity tours to Israel at this important time to show the people of Israel that the South African Jewish community, despite the views of our government, stand firmly behind them during this terrible war. As part of our campaign to raise awareness for the hostages in Gaza, we, together with the base, distributed thousands of yellow ribbons across Johannesburg.
At the JNF, we're building future environmental Zionist activists.
We have become a premier South African communal organization, and we will continue to be that for many years to come.
We'd like to thank our partners, our donors, and our supporters, without whom none of this would be possible. And we invite you to join us at our events, get involved with our activities and our projects. Please continue to buy gift certificates. You can purchase trees in Israel in memory of somebody, to celebrate a simcha.
With the support of KKL in Israel and our donors here in South Africa, we can ensure that our projects in Israel and South Africa will continue for another 120 years, promoting the connection between the South African Jewish community and the land of Israel.
Working together, we can ensure a better future for our children, for our planet, and for ourselves.
So a big thank you to the JNF for partnering with us this evening. And of course, Dylan is on control this evening. Dylan, a big welcome and thank you very much. Tell us what's on the front page of the Jewish Report this week.
Yes, with pleasure. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. It's a full house tonight. Very, very excited for this webinar. Lots of people mentioned during the week saying how excited they were and how they're looking forward to it. Howard, see my screen right now?
I can. So on the front page of the Jewish Report this week is the Chief Rabbi's speech and blessing at the inauguration of Cyril Ramaphosa as our new president. A very difficult decision to make by the Chief Rabbi of whether, in fact, he should participate in the inauguration of our president or not, given very much the attitude of our previous government, led by Cyril Ramaphosa, towards the South African Jewish community in Israel. So we cover quite extensively what the Chief Rabbi said. Please go pick up a hard copy. We produce about 11,500 hard copies, which are read by approximately 33,000 people. And you can pick them up at Kosher World or at Discam or at Spar or Woolworths or Checkers or your local Pick and Pay or your Jewish school or restaurant. Go and pick up a hard copy edition. We also distribute through 36,000 people who receive our email newsletter every week. Or you could be one of the approximately 100,000 people who go on every month onto sajr.co.za and actually go and either download the full edition or alternatively read each of the individual articles. Don't forget as well that this is our 169th broadcast that we've done since we've started this webinar series, and you can catch up on any of the previous 168 that we've done by going either onto the Jewish Report's website or alternatively on YouTube. Just look for SA Jewish Report and you'll be able to find all of our past webinars there as well. So a big thank you to Dylan. Dylan and Michael this evening will be trawling through all your comments and questions on YouTube, Facebook, Zoom, and Instagram, and bringing all of those questions so Miri and I can have a discussion about that as well. Michael, we'll see you in a little while, but we are full on Zoom. So if you have friends or family who are struggling to get into the Zoom, please refer them onto YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, where they'll be able to watch this as well. So Miri Eisen, a big welcome to you. We were speaking previously during our pre-chat about the 2 visits you've previously had to South Africa, but I think people will actually want to know, who are the Eisens? Tell us a little about yourself, your background, explain this American accent, and tell us about who you are and the entire family, because you have quite an illustrious family in the IDF, in the Israeli ministry.
You know, it's one of those questions that's going to take all of the time if we just talk about family, even though that's actually a great subject. So my parents are American. They chose to make Aliyah from California, not Beverly Hills. I saw somebody who was from Beverly Hills. We made Aliyah from the Bay Area near San Francisco. I've been here for 53 years. It's funny, I was just looking at the date. Today is June 23rd, and on June 27th, it'll be my Aliyah anniversary. We remember it very clearly because we did something very exceptional. In 1971, the Sochnut, the Jewish agency, that then when you made Aliyah, you could actually choose as a family if you came by boat or by plane. And so I actually left the United States from New York We sailed next to the Statue of Liberty, crossed the Atlantic Ocean, crossed the Mediterranean Sea. And the first time I got to see the state of Israel was by boat, Haifa, from the sea. And that's how we made Aliyah. My parents are here, my sisters are here. We all married Israelis. All of our kids are Sabra, we all married Israelis, and all of our kids are here. I served in the IDF for over 20 years, retiring at the rank of full colonel. My husband is also a full colonel. Both of us were in military intelligence. And right now, 2024 caught us in time, 2023, 24, that all three of our kids are serving now in the Israeli Defense Forces. My two older kids are officers, both of them in the intelligence world, and the younger one is a computer programmer, which you also need in the IDF.
An amazing story. What do your kids think about having two colonels as parents?
So it's something that I guess you live with your whole life. Think of it that it's two colonels where I have such an American accent also. So they're most definitely people who understand the military more. We certainly are very open about what we've done in our lives. But the one thing that it took many years for them to understand is the issue that both of their parents were in military intelligence. Howard, there were a lot of secrets in our house. And because the two older ones now are also in military intelligence, it's kind of the joke inside the family that the adorable number 3, who's the computer programmer, go outside of the room, we need to talk secrets. But we're very much within what we do. We're very proud of our service. And we really do feel that the best and the brightest, what they do inside the state of Israel really can make a difference.
So let's begin on probably one of the hardest days of all of our lives. Let's begin on the 7th of October. Where were you? What happened and what did you think?
So October 7th, Saturday, Shabbat Simchat Torah, 6:29 a.m., the siren goes off. It's a house full of military people. My husband and I are retired. 2 out of the 3 kids were home, but it was a Shabbat. And we looked at each other as we met. We don't actually have a mamad, the safe room, the bomb shelter. We have a staircase. So we went out to our staircase. We meet there, and the 4 of us said, "Oh, has Hezbollah started the war?" And I'm saying that now because we're going to talk more about Hezbollah. And the 4 of us were waiting, expecting Hezbollah to start a war. And then we looked at our phones, and we saw that it was coming from down south, Hamas. And we were like, that was unexpected. And that just goes to show that we are a house full of people who are in the military. The failure, the colossal failure of the lack of early warning, the not understanding, both within our house, inside the establishment, was absolute. Having said that, my husband left within half an hour. My 2 kids were out of the house within half an hour. None of them were really home for months on end. I think that all of us, though, very early on October 7th, I looked at what Hamas was doing and I could understand it immediately. That doesn't mean that I foresaw it, but I immediately could understand it once it started. And that was what I started to do. I've been doing an enormous amount of media for the last 9 months. In the first 2 months, it was pretty much all I was doing. But it's about analyzing it, understanding it, not for historical purposes, but because we're still in it and we need to look at it and face it and be able to deal with it and to deal with the additional threats that are out there.
So, of course, in hindsight, we know a lot more. But if we were having this conversation on the 6th rather than the 7th, and if I would ask you what were the most important trends in the Middle East, what were you most fearful about, what would you have told me on the 6th of October?
So I'm going to share with you and our audience what I told live on October 5th. And I'm saying that because I was doing I-24, that's the locally based 24/7 English news channel. And on October 5th, or in the year of 2023, but certainly in the week before the war, we were all talking about 50 years to the Yom Kippur 1973 war. And I remind everybody that the Day of Atonement War was a colossal failure. It was a failure of early warning, absolute. And then afterwards, in the fighting itself, it was tactically and certainly operationally, the IDF did an amazing job, but there was a huge aspect that had to do with the failure of intelligence to state that that was going to happen in 1973 in Howard. in a TV studio live on October 5th at 7:30 p.m. in 2023. I was asked by the person doing the interview, it was the whole session, the live panel was about 50 years to the 1973 war. And she asked me the first question. She said, Miri, could the colossal failure of what happened on October 6, 1973 happen again? Howard, I looked at her and I said to the camera, absolutely, tomorrow morning. And I said that on October 5th, 7:30 p.m., 2023, and I did not know what was going to happen on October 7th. The colossal failure of October 7th is a colossal failure. It's a failure that has to do with a combination. Everybody wants the smoking gun. It's not one smoking gun. There are a lot of different things that add into it. But I'm going to focus on two things. One is what I call blindness. It's similar to what happened to the US in 2001 in the failure to stop a 9/11 because, and I say blindness, when you have all of the pieces of information and you see them, you even read them, but you do not put them together. You do not understand them. And that was one of the failures of October 7th. And it's a very strong one. The second one is a harsher one, and it's the failure of unthinkability. You cannot predict, you cannot prevent, you cannot foretell something that is unthinkable to you. And I say with a very, very heavy heart that the atrocities, the genocidal atrocities that Hamas committed on October 7th were unthinkable. And sadly, they won't be unthinkable anymore. So that may make me smarter for the next time, but there's an aspect of naivete, of unthinkability. You can't believe that there were, I can't call them human beings, that planned for a year or two because we had the information. But A, we were blind, and B, it was unthinkable. And that's just two of the elements because there were a lot additional ones. So in hindsight, as I say, within an hour or two, I understood the plan. I understood what they were doing. I looked at it all. I was appalled. But the failure was because we were not seeing the pieces. We did not expect it. And the actions that they took were unthinkable.
So what do we actually know about the plan? What did Hamas intend? And did they think they would get as far as they did? Did they think they would get further? What do we actually know in retrospect?
In retrospect, I would say they weren't necessarily coming in to conquer the south of Israel, but if they had made it the whole way to Jerusalem, which was in the plan, that was fine. What they were doing is a combined terror attack, which is unprecedented. They wanted and planned to attack over 40 communities. And when I say communities, that includes going towards the big city of Beersheba, to Ashdod, to Ashkelon. And in their mind, they were going all the way to Al-Quds, that's Jerusalem in Arabic. And in that sense, they wanted to go very far. But the plan was the atrocities, the horrific barbaric actions of attacking, burning, destroying, pillaging, raping, all of the things that they did, and the taking of the hostages. And that was the plan. And it is such a heinous plan. I mean, when you look at it, I say in hindsight, I think that we probably had all of the portions of the plan. And I think the people who looked at that were like, that's not, that. It's, as I said, it was unthinkable. And the reason that I'm so much more sure today that we really did have all of the pieces of the plan, but we just could not think that they're real is because for many years, we remember I started by saying on October 7th that we thought it was Hezbollah, because Hezbollah in Lebanon has openly and very overtly been training and sending out to the world pictures in the last 5 years of a big operation that they've called Conquer the Galilee. And it was supposed to be the ground, air, sea, underground combined attack against dozens of Israeli communities, which is why on October 7th, 8th, Israel preemptively evacuated the bulk of Israeli communities that are near the border, because that threat was something that was known, and nobody wanted Hezbollah to be able to do what Hamas had done, and nobody was looking at Hamas. And so it was that combined, very large scale, with the heart of it being the terrorizing of us. That's all of the atrocities that they did and continue to do, hand in hand with taking the hostages. For them, the hostages are their, I call it their bargaining chip. It's such a harsh word, and I don't want anybody to think of it that way. But I need you to realize that that's the way Hamas views the hostages, as the bargaining chip, as their get out of jail free card. It is a horrible aspect of what they did, and it's unprecedented. There's never been such an attack, even, I don't want to say even, in Africa, in attacks that were done by some of the Islamist groups where they took hundreds of hostages. In Boko Haram did so in some of Western African countries. It's happened more than once. And for a moment, it's horrible. It's unprecedented, but not but. The Islamic State took young women to be brides, and that's just as horrible. Here, they terrorized everybody by killing, murdering, chopping, doing all the horrible things, and taking the hostages. It's just an impossible combination.
So what has surprised you in Israel's response and what we've learned since Israel entered Gaza? Were the extensiveness of the tunnel network, did that come as a shock and a surprise? Did the preparedness come as a shock and surprise? Or did Israel know all about this before?
So I'm going to say something which sounds very harsh, but one of the reasons that not necessarily just the Israeli Defense Forces, but the understanding of what Hamas has been preparing over the last 15 years, the subterranean underground system, the use of the urban populated area as one big, huge terror military base, taking the hostages themselves both into the subterranean and into the urban area. All of these are things that were known up front, and it's one of the reasons that nobody, really nobody, wants to go in and conquer the Gaza Strip. So you say, in hindsight, you should have done it before, there would have been less. And I say, it isn't that there's ever a good stage for a horrible war. It would have been a horrible war 10 years ago. I want to remind everybody, we left all of the Gaza Strip 19 years ago. And in its own way, I do think that we wanted to believe that Hamas was becoming more responsible and that they were going to invest in their 2.2 million people, something that they did not do. But I'm not surprised by the amount of tunnels. I'm not surprised by the capabilities. There's two different kind of, I'll call them types of tunnels. There's strategic tunnels that are the ones that the IDF, because they put out footage all the time, they're the ones that have electricity, that they were built for a very long stay. They're very deep underground, and they give the Hamas fighters mobility to be able to move from north to south to central. Just today, when we talk about the actions that are taking place in Rafah, that through that subterranean underground system, the terror fighters can then go back towards Khan Yunis, where we were already fighting. From Khan Yunis, they can go to the northern Gaza Strip, where we were fighting last year. But that whole system was built over 15 years. So I'm not surprised, but I'm appalled. And there is no military tactic. I'm not even talking operational level, because to destroy the tunnels, you do it pretty much 100 meters at a time. There is no easy way, and the IDF tried to invent ways. And as such, it means that I'm not surprised. And pretty much from October last year, since the beginning of the ground operation, the understanding that I've brought to the table, and we're already 9 months into this, is that this ground war goes on for a very long time. Because until we destroy that underground subterranean arena, Hamas, military Hamas, I'm not talking about the ideology, but the military capabilities have mobility, and that we need to destroy.
So talk to us a little about, it is 9 months, you mentioned it. I think many of us were hoping that we're near the end of it, but you're indicating that that's not a possibility at this point in time. What is a military possibility, and how do the politics interplay with that to potentially prevent a military victory?
So let me start with the military victory, because I don't want the voices and the rhetoric and the politics that are there. For a moment, I'm not exactly naive, but they're not part of the military action. The Israeli military action in the last 9 months has been slow, systematic, clear, and in its own way, they've taken it stage by stage. I was in the room not where the decisions themselves were made, but I was in some of the thinking groups that were talking about it, and it was very clear that it would be stage 1, high intensity, and that was more what we were seeing in October, November, December last year. Stage 2 within the Gaza Strip, just to destroy the Hamas terror capabilities. It would be what we call focused arenas, meaning into Khan Yunis and out of Khan Yunis, into Rafah and out of Rafah, and all of those consistently to destroy the Hamas military terror capabilities, their cache of weapons, to destroy the tunnels. And the tunnels to do so, I'm like snipping with my hands. You do it slowly, 100 meters at a time, and there are hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, and you're only snipping them 100 meters at a time. That's going to take a long time. And the military strategy in that sense is still to constantly target the different, because the Hamas themselves have tens of thousands of operatives. That doesn't surprise anybody. What did surprise me, and again, it's on a low level, but it's part of what's there, is that they had many more construction facilities to make the weapons, even more than what they would for smuggling in. The action that Israel has been doing over the last month and a half on the Gaza and Egyptian border has to do with nipping the smuggling tunnels from being able to leave the Gaza Strip into Egypt or to be able to bring weapons inside. That's why Israel has been acting there. So that's how I see it now. It's a systematic, slow, ugly war. I don't know any pretty war. But this is the ugly war. There's 2.2 million people. You tell them to move from one area to another to save their lives. It doesn't make it nice. It doesn't make it pretty, but that's to save their lives. And you go after the cache of weapons, the terrorists themselves, and that endless subterranean capability. That is slow. It's systematic. I think it's going to go on all of 2024 into 2025. And that's just the military capability. The politics don't come into it. That's not the question. It's about systematically destroying their military capability so that Hamas cannot do an October 7th attack again. That they can't do. They'll be able to fire single missiles. They've definitely got enough weapons inside the Gaza Strip to attack the Israeli soldiers there. But they're gonna, as I said, they'll be able to fire missiles into Israel because they built that capability over 15 years at the heart of the urban area. And as long as we try, and we try, to avoid the civilian casualties, and yet there's an enormous amount of civilian casualties. As long as we try and continue to do so, systematic, slow, but it's going to take a while.
So it would appear that almost all of this weaponry came in from Egypt, under the border from Egypt. Was Egypt complicit in all of this? Or is it just smuggling is one of those things that happen in the Middle East, you have to live with it?
So I'm going to be rude and say smuggling happens everywhere. Every country can go and look at their own borders. Israel has always known of the smuggling routes from the Gaza Strip to Egypt. They existed, however, when we were there. And we left the Gaza Strip in 2005. And really the biggest and largest debate inside Israeli politics almost 20 years ago when Israel decided on disengagement and leaving the Gaza Strip was about should we or shouldn't we leave the Gaza-Egyptian border? And we left it. And we've not been there until we went in a couple months ago on the Gazan side. So there are smuggling routes there. I never know how to answer it without sounding really, really rude and mean. But Sinai, that enormous area that Israel occupied in the 1967 war, that we had communities that we built there from 67, that we evacuated all of it in the peace treaty together with Israel and Egypt. Sinai is I don't know what the equivalent would be. You tell me in South Africa what the equivalent would be of the boondocks. Of far, far away. In the United States, I would call it, North Dakota. It's not an important part for Egypt. And in it, you have Bedouin tribes that are not treated well by Egyptians. And the main income of a lot of the Bedouin tribes, and now I'm doing a generalization, which is not fair, is the smuggling that they could do. And those smuggling routes existed long ago. There's smuggling routes for food and for goods and for vehicles and for weapons. It wasn't only weapons. Do the Egyptians enjoy it? I am sure that there are Egyptians who cut the coupon on that. That doesn't mean that we should trash all of our relationship with the government of Egypt, and that's a part of the challenge that we have.
When we think back almost a year ago, the big issue in the Middle East was the Abraham Accords. Suddenly, Israel was making peace with additional Arab states. Saudi Arabia looked like it would be next. And a lot of the thinking after the 7th of October was the fact that it may have been the Iranians trying to scupper further normalization between Israel and some of its Arab neighbors. Do we still believe this, or was this part of a much bigger plan?
So first of all, there's no question to me that Hamas's timing in doing the action had to do with the enlargement of the Abraham Accords, because what happens in the agreements that Israel signed with, I mean, it's a whole list, right? Okay, it's United Arab Emirates, it's Bahrain, it was Morocco. The United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and those portions of it have lasted very well in the last 9 months. I'd say that the Moroccan one has been a lot more hurt by it. It was supposed to include also Sudan. At the end, it didn't, but I'm saying that because Saudi Arabia is a different category. And for Israel to arrive at a resolution with Saudi Arabia without there being an Israeli-Palestinian resolution, that may bug Palestinians worldwide. For Hamas, in that sense, it's called poking in the eye. You do things at that point where, in its own way, we were looking in other directions. I think that over the last 2 years, while there was that advancement of the normalization with different Arabic countries, that for Hamas, more than the Palestinians all over, Hamas as the Islamist ones, it was that they had to stop it, that they had to make sure that there was no more advance, because they felt, because at the end they're Sunni, and the Sauds are Sunni. And how can it be that all of these countries like Jordan, like Egypt, that are both Sunni, and Saudi Arabia and everything, that they're all willing to acquiesce, to agree to relationships with Israel without resolving their issue? And in that sense, that's like a trigger. But you mentioned Iran. And here I want to say, I mean, for me, it's an exception that we've already been talking for, what am I looking at? Half an hour. I can't even see without my glasses anything there. It's called half an hour, right? Okay. And I haven't yet mentioned Iran. And thank you for mentioning them. And I say that because to me, there's no question whatsoever, and to all of those listening right now, Iran, the Islamic regime of Iran. This isn't about 90 million Persian-speaking people. This is about the Islamic regime that has put as a main aspect the annihilation of the cancer of the world, which is the Zionist entity, me, Israel. They say it openly. They have anniversaries and holidays to enact it. They have built full-scale capabilities through the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Within that, the Al-Quds force, the Houthis, you tell them to fire, they fire. The different Hezbollahs, you tell them to act, they act. And Iran supplies money, training, weaponry, ideology. And in the case of the Hamas attack of October 7th, because of its similarity to the attack that we were looking at Hezbollah training for, I would say that Iran, the Islamic regime, again, it's the Islamic regime and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard within it, are the ones who supply capabilities. It's a country of 90 million people that has a very strong military industry. And again, not to put things in a small portion, but right now, the Islamic regime of Iran is one of the main suppliers of weapons for Russia against Ukraine. That's the same Islamic regime. And they supply an immense amount of weapons. And in that sense, when I go backwards and look at everything going on, the only ones that have gained in the last 9 months, I don't think Hamas have gained. I think that they have a lot of impact, but I don't think they've gained. But I think that Hezbollah and the Islamic regime of Iran are the only ones that in the last 9 months can go, wow, times are good. And I think that what I just said right now is absolutely horrible if the Islamic regime of Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon think that times are good for them.
So what is Iran's intention? I mean, one intention may very well be the eradication of Israel, but Is there an intention to spreading Shiite Islam around the world? Is there an intention of controlling, re-establishing an Iranian empire? The Iranian empire at one point in time went as far as India, Pakistan. It was the Peacock Throne. What does Iran actually want?
So again, I do that distinction between 2,500, 3,000 years of Persian culture, history that have given so many things to the world, and between the mullah Islamic regime that took over Iran from 1979 until 1986 under the Ayatollah Khomeini, that everybody remembers his face. He's a very distinctive picture. And from 1986, and we're in 2024, under the Ayatollah Khamenei, what do they want? They want an Islamic regime. They want to feel that what I'm going to say now is from the Iranian Islamic regime's point of view. They want to be rulers, not a question that they want to conquer the world. They want to spread the word. And take the note that I said this as if in a nice way. From their point of view, their version of Islam, they don't call themselves the Shiite regime of Iran. They are the Islamic regime of Iran. They want their version of Islam to be the Islamic regime. They want it to be spread much further. It is a very, very conservative interpretation. I'm not Muslim. I don't think that most, I don't know, maybe there are Muslims. There's all sorts of different types of Islam, and I want to say that clearly. They are not all calling for the annihilation and eradication of Israel on the one hand, or of anybody else in the world. There are a lot of different versions. The Islamic regime of Iran's version is one that openly wants to destabilize Sunni countries. And it sends in different capabilities. And for that matter, the ones that they want to destabilize, like Saudi Arabia, for that matter, like Bahrain or the UAE, or like Egypt, the Islamic regime, they send in different types of destabilizing forces. Who are the destabilizing forces? So it comes out of the Islamic regime. They built an entire separate military capability known as the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. It exports itself worldwide, and I don't want anybody to feel comfortable anywhere in the world, okay? I know that we have people literally from all of the continents, and kudos to you for your amazing crowd that comes in to listen to you here, because these capabilities are in Central and South America. And if they're in Central and South America, I'm breathing in deep, they're in North America, because everybody wants to hope that they're not there. This Islamic regime exports it not by dressing like the mullah, speaking Persian and being a foreigner. They step into these different places and they want to see an Islamic regime worldwide, and do it one step at a time. And if the last thing I'll say on this time-wise is that in general, there's a question if their timeline is about tomorrow morning, this year or next year, meaning immediately, because at the end, Khamenei is 86 years old. Does he want this to be something that he, as the supreme leader, sees this year? And most of the time when we talk about the Islamic regime and Islamists in general, Hamas are like this too, Hezbollah are like this as well, in different ways, but they're similar on this. They have a very long-term vision. They say, so it won't happen now. It'll happen in 10 years. If not in 10 years, in 30 years. It's a whole different way of looking at it, and you take it one step at a time. And I feel that the events that we're living in the last 9 months are the result of 25 years of planning, of 25 years of delegitimizing Israel, of dehumanizing Israel. And the two main delegitimizers and dehumanizers are the Islamic regime of Iran and Islamist Hamas-type organizations.
So let's turn our attention now a little maybe to Lebanon. Hezbollah. Who are Hezbollah? Are they a Palestinian military group?
So not. They are Lebanese. They speak Arabic. The tens of thousands of fighters of Hezbollah Lebanon were born in Lebanon. They are Shiites. They're not Sunni. None of them are Palestinian. But Hezbollah was established, inspired by the Islamic Revolution in Iran. They were established 1981, 82, but mainly established after Israel invaded against Palestinian terrorism in Lebanon, and Hezbollah, as the Lebanese, established their organization inspired by Shiite Islam inside Lebanon to fight against Israel. And they're hand in hand with the Palestinian cause, but that's not their cause. And Hezbollah built itself in the 1980s and 90s as a military terror group against Israel inside Lebanon, because at that time, the Israeli military sat in southern Lebanon. But to be clear, they attacked inside the state of Israel when Israel was still in Lebanon. It wasn't that they've always seen Israel as being illegal, illegitimate. And when Israel, 24 years ago, in May of 2000, realigned and redeployed all of the Israeli military forces that had been deployed in Lebanon back into Israel, Hezbollah said, yes, we won. And they said, and now stage two. And that stage two is, as I said, in the 25 years of a very long campaign, it's to try to terrorize us because we're a democracy. It's much easier to terrorize in democracies because we have open societies, because we listen, because we care, because we just do so many, because we actually believe people, because we want to think the best. I mean, just there's a variety of different aspects of a certain naivete that can be in democracies. And Hezbollah, over the years, has built and built. In 2006, Hezbollah, after 6 years of doing different attacks against Israel inside Israel in 2006, they did a cross-border attack, kidnapped and killed Israeli soldiers, held them for 2 years, and that was the second Lebanon war. And in the last, again, it's almost 18 years, very parallel to the time period that Hamas have ruled over the Gaza Strip, what they've built. And Howard, people didn't understand when I say that. I want you to not be surprised. Hezbollah is Hamas on steroids. Anything you saw from Hamas on October 7th or since, Hezbollah has 10 times in the amount and weaponry that Hamas could not dream of, because Hezbollah is in Lebanon. It is directly supplied by the Islamic regime of Iran. Hezbollah is a close ally of Bashar al-Assad's Syria, so that they have a supply line that comes from Iran through Iraq, through Syria to supply Hezbollah. Hezbollah has weapons, capabilities, drones, swarms, UAVs, everything Russia uses against Ukraine that they've gotten from Iran, Hezbollah has in Lebanon.
How big is that arsenal?
The arsenal, we say it as a figure. People always ask me where I know the figure from, and I need to find it, but the amount of missiles and rockets that Hezbollah has is the 8th largest cache of rockets and missiles in the world, meaning it's bigger than Taiwan or India, okay? It's the 8th largest in the world. Russia has more missiles. Israel has more missiles, but Hezbollah, not the country called Lebanon, has over 150,000 projectiles that I'm talking about, missiles and rockets. On top of that, over the last 3 years, there has been an endless supply route of different type of what we call aerial platforms, UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. Drones are the small ones. The UAVs are the bigger ones. Go look online. There are ones both from today. There was an attack, and they've shown, because they are suicide UAVs and suicide drones. There are bigger ones and smaller and larger ones that have enormous payloads of weaponry, of explosives. And Hezbollah has attacked Israel every single day since October 7th. The only 2 days they did not attack was last week in 2 days of the Hajj, because it was the annual Muslim festival of the Hajj, and there were 2 days that Hezbollah did not attack. That was it. From October 7th, and they started attacking on October 7th, and they used rockets and missiles and mortars and anti-tank missiles and drones and suicide drones and UAVs and.
And what sort of missiles are these? Is this kind of shoot and hope, or are these precision guided missiles that they have?
So until around 5 years ago, the bulk of them were what you call statistic. But because they have so many, when you fire statistically 100, then just statistically 95 get through the Iron Dome. I'm just saying statistically. Sorry. 95 will be intercepted, 95% interception. But that's rockets. Rockets have a motor. Mortars don't have motors, and we don't know how to intercept them. They're shorter range. And the missiles are the ones that have guided systems. And what Hezbollah has been getting from Iran via Syria over the last 3, 4, 5 years, and according to the international press, Israel has done a lot of preemptive strikes, both in Lebanon and in Syria and in Iraq, to stop that supply line, to turn the different types of munitions into more guided precision weaponry. Why does that matter? Because when Hezbollah can use precision-guided weaponry, then they can take out the military capabilities that are there to defend us. And so it's not just a question that, so they fire into Israel statistically or not. We can intercept most of the ones that are not guided. The ones that are guided are harder to intercept, and they're that much more exact. And those are the challenges that we are aware of. We have lots of capability. Israel develops lots of capability, but this challenge is one that, looking at the Russia-Ukraine war, looking at the Iranian attack against Israel on the night of April 13th, 14th, you can see it's effective, but, and I say the but, because some will get through. And the some that will get through will have payloads that will be very damaging. We will continue to exist. We will respond. We're going to be there. But that war will not look the same as the war that Hamas started on October 7th.
So is war definitely coming? Is it inevitable?
Isn't that the $64,000 question? Nothing is inevitable, except for death. But that's called, and I think, and then they say in taxes.
And taxes, especially taxes.
Right, okay. And I don't mean to be at all belittle. I mean, this is the biggest question that there is. On October 7th, as Hamas attacked Israel, Hezbollah opened fire in the north as well. And as I've described, there were so many early warnings about Hezbollah doing the kind of ground attack, and with all of the different capabilities that Hamas showed and more, that Israel preemptively told a series of communities. We're talking about 24 communities. I say communities. A city of 24,000 people was preemptively evacuated. City of Kiryat Shmona, amongst others. And they have not been allowed to return since. When I say allowed, it's dangerous. Hezbollah attacks there every single day. So I'm going to ask all of these amazing people who are listening right now, if you live in Metula or in Kiryat Shmona or in Shlomi, and you can't, the military right now is saying you can't move back. You see every single day they are attacking into those communities. So you're not going to move back there. So how do you move back? How do you get Hezbollah to not attack? And the options are, none of them are great. You can do diplomacy, but do you believe Hezbollah? Do you believe that there's an international capability in the world that's going to tell Israel, and that we're going to believe them, and they're going to say Hezbollah is not going to use their capabilities, or they have to move the capabilities further away from the Israeli border? Who's going to implement that? Who's going to watch that? But if you don't do the diplomacy, then the war becomes inevitable, because you have people who have not lived in their homes for the last 9 months, not in their apartments and not in their farm areas. The area itself, in that sense, which is a farmland that has different types of fruits all in and around, let alone the wine country, similar to what you have when I was down in Cape Town in South Africa, where all of that is just like, you can't go there. It's dangerous. So if you can't let people go home, maybe Israel should take care of it. I just described to you that to take care of that is a harsh war. What's better? For Israel to start it, or for Israel not to start it, and then maybe it won't happen, and maybe there will be diplomacy. And I say that because that does come in to international community, to Israel's relationship with the United States, with France, with the EU, with the UK. All of these countries have a stake in Lebanon. And Hezbollah is in Lebanon and they're Lebanese. It's not the same as Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And these are all challenges. So I don't know if it's inevitable. I know that my friends can't go home and they've been living, it's not a life. I mean, we know that from the South, but most people are not aware of the fact that it is 80,000 people from the North and not just the 100,000 people from the South. And where we need safe borders. So I don't think it's inevitable, but I do think that without a military confrontation, Hezbollah has no reason, as I said at the beginning, they feel stronger, not weaker now. They're selling out to the world. They've been threatening Israel today. They threaten us all the time. They attack us all the time. They threatened Cyprus yesterday. They threatened Cyprus. Cyprus is part of the EU. The EU said, you can't go out and threatening Cyprus, but that's where we are right now. These terror organizations are trying to define the rules, and we cannot allow them because they're saying it's all about Israel. But to be clear to everybody, it's all about the world. And I say that very sadly.
So explain to us what Lebanon actually looks like, because an average person watching this would say, well, Hezbollah, a terrorist group within Lebanon, why doesn't the Lebanese army just go and remove them? I mean, that would seem to be a logical question, but it would probably not understand how politics works within Lebanon and whether Lebanon is a functioning state at all.
So Lebanon is a sovereign state that has in and around 7 or 8 million people. On top of that, and that includes denominations that I'll talk about in a moment. The way that the system of government was established there from the 1940s, they were under a French mandate and they got independence during World War II. And they built a very unique governmental structure, which is based on the representation, and the term that they use in Lebanon is confessions, of different confessions. And you have Sunni, Shiite, Alawite, and Druze. All of those are said to be Muslim, even though they're not all Muslim, but I'm saying it in that way. And then you have 12 different Christian denominations that each one of them, that's the confessions, and each one is represented in parliament. And the governmental structure is built on the representation where the president is always Christian Maronite, the Speaker of the House is always Shiite, the Prime Minister is always Sunni, and I could go down the list of who's Druze, who's Greek Orthodox, who's Greek Catholic, who's Armenian Catholic. There are just lots of different denominations, and it's very unique. The numbers inside Lebanon, if I said 7 or 8 million, are very, very tested, because in the war that happened in Syria from 2011 and onward, at least 1 million Syrian refugees came into Lebanon, at least 1 million. And it's a country that didn't exactly have the capability to sustain that. And so add on into it that you have 1 million Syrians that live in shacks and in tents and in homes. And what happens when 1 million refugees come in is the job that you and I are willing to do for $10 an hour, the refugee is willing to do for $1 an hour because they need the money. And Lebanon's economy went down the drain almost 4 years ago. It's beyond dysfunctional. It has no economy. And so all of the functions that a country is supposed to do, and this isn't a joke, they actually had protests there because you as if pay taxes, but nobody gathers the garbage. There's no such thing as public schools. There's no such thing as public hospitals. Everything is private, and it's totally dysfunctional. And the president ended his being president in October 2022. We're already in 2024. And Parliament is supposed to choose the president. There's an impasse. So I just gave way too much information about Lebanon. But in that, Hezbollah are part of it. They're not an outside force that came in. They are the Shiite Lebanese. They are probably half of the population, but the demographics in Lebanon, there hasn't been a census, literally from 1932. And the representation is based on a census that took place 94 years ago, or more, 2024, I'm really bad at math, 90, whatever. But I say that because right now inside Lebanon, a dysfunctional country, when you ask, what about the Lebanese army? What about the Lebanese army? And the Shiites are half of the population. They both serve in the Lebanese army, and they are recruited into Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, over 15 years ago, joined into the political system so that they're actually ministers from Hezbollah. Remember you told me that you started these sessions with COVID? So one of the worst things that happened to Hezbollah, I have a very nasty sense of humor, but one of the happy things for me that happened to Hezbollah is that they're the Ministry of Health. And they became the Ministry of Health 6 months before COVID. When they took the Ministry of Health, I don't think that they intended to be the ones responsible for the COVID response in Lebanon, which was non-existent. And sadly, Lebanon is a failed country, dysfunctional, has an enormous expat, wonderful congregation worldwide, but that's what it is. Nobody can stop Hezbollah.
So, Miri, God forbid the war actually happens. What does it look like?
So it will be very heavy, high-intensity warfare for a week to 2. And I'm going to give it in a descriptive way. It means that Hezbollah fires from all over Lebanon and also from Syria, because Hezbollah, over the last decade, deployed its Lebanese forces also onto the Syrian side of the border so that they would also be firing from that side. They'll fire into Israel an enormous amount of, altogether, of rockets and missiles and mortars. And all of those, the different interceptors that Israel has built over the year, the Iron Dome, David's Sling, Arrow, there are different types of rocket interceptors that we've invested in. They will intercept, the percentage will go down, but they'll intercept 80%. But what that means is that 20% will get through. And that 20% that gets through will hit average towns in and around the greater Tel Aviv area. Hezbollah will aim it at the airport, and Hezbollah will aim it at the electrical plants and at all the different aspects and at all the different military camps. Again, a lot will be intercepted. 80% is amazing, but it's not the 95% right now. And we're not sitting around cold turkey not doing anything. But it does mean that there will be casualties, that it will do things both to the electrical grid, perhaps to the water. And in that sense, that's something, I mean, it sounds very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. That's all-out war. At the exact same time that they're doing that, Israel will be attacking in Lebanon. And when we attack in Lebanon, it will not just be South Lebanon and not just the main Hezbollah sites right now. The main Hezbollah fortress is in the heart of the city of Beirut. And Beirut it won't sit around and be nothing. And then, like, the world is going to go, why is Israel attacking Lebanon? And it's like, that is where Hezbollah has a whole area inside the capital city of Beirut. As I said, they're Lebanese, but it's an area that Lebanese police can't go into, that you go in through checkpoints that are Hezbollah checkpoints. I'm not talking about a street and a half. I'm talking about an enormous portion of the city of Beirut. Air Force, different capabilities. I wonder, at the stage of that full scale, we probably will get projectiles being fired at us, both from the Houthis, because they have intercontinental ballistic missiles that they've gotten from the Iranians. And I wonder if the Iranians will join in. I don't think they will, because the Islamic regime of Iran wants everybody to be in battle and not Iran. Okay, but they shouldn't be let out of it. And I think that at that stage that I'm talking about, which is a very harsh week, I don't think that we'll stand alone. I think that we will have allies that will come and fight with us, and we will control. That doesn't mean, fully destroying, but we will control it to the degree that they will destroy a lot of the Hezbollah capabilities and force them to stop. And again, what I just described right now is not exactly a pretty picture.
If that happens, does Iran get off scot-free?
That is my biggest challenge. And I say it to everywhere worldwide. Wherever you are in the world, go find out what your country's relationship is with the Islamic regime of Iran. Go find out if they're giving money, if they're giving capabilities. The Islamic regime of Iran is not friends for anybody. It is the worst thing in that sense. And it's not that, it's the boogie, it's the octopus, but it's just like you said, they keep getting off stark free. They attacked Israel with 300 projectiles on the night of April 13th, April 14th. And essentially, they kind of got away with it. Why? Because everybody's afraid of Iran. Now look at what happens right now. Everybody's afraid of what Hamas could do after what they just did. Everybody's afraid of Hezbollah because they have these capabilities. And all of the capabilities came from Iran. And the fact that at the end Iran gets up stock free is a very big challenge in today's day and age. The Islamic regime is in bed with Russia. And I say that because looking around, I wonder about China. You look at these different countries and you go, not good times in and around the countries that really do not, it's not just a question of democracy. This isn't about the naive aspect just of democracy, but really talking about the destabilizing, weapon-producing, terror-exporting countries of the world today.
Miri, I want us to take a 2-minute break because you've been talking for an hour and I'm sure you need something to drink. We want to come back and talk about a few things. We want to talk about what is Israel's best option. And we want to answer so many of the literally hundreds of questions that have come in while you were talking as well. So we're going to have a 1-minute advert from Mantis Security, which Dylan's going to play for us. We're going to raise some money for the JNF because the JNF has this project for firefighters in the north. And we know the north is going to be really, really hot. And people who are watching us this evening who are able to contribute and give some money to try help the safety of what's happening in the north of Israel. We'd love them to participate in that. And then we're going to come back and answer all of these really difficult questions. And I see there've been a lot of questions about the Israeli Prime Minister as well. And I'm going to try to put you on the spot. When you come back, you can duck those with pleasure. So Dylan, let's watch the Mantis video, please. And a huge thank you to Mantis, one of our sponsors for this evening. But Michael Kransdorf, if I could ask you to join us, please. The JNF, you were talking earlier about your solidarity mission that you did to Israel, but you're also supporting firefighting in the north, in the Galilee, on the Lebanese border. Tell us how we can help.
Thanks, Howard. A big thank you to Miri for joining us on this webinar tonight. And as she mentioned, the situation in the north is really serious and maybe forgotten. People don't realize that 80,000 people living in the north of Israel have been evacuated from their homes. And those communities have been shelled by Hezbollah with rockets and tank fire for the last 6 months. That situation has escalated quite dramatically in the last few weeks. And over 6,000 hectares of land in northern Israel has actually been set on fire. Forests, agricultural land, homes. And the JNF, one of our roles and our partners in Israel, Keren Kayemet Le'Israel, KKL, are involved in firefighting activities in the state of Israel. And they are being overwhelmed at the moment by the number of fires that are taking place because of the Hezbollah rockets and attacks on northern Israel. And they've reached out to us to ask us to help support the firefighters that are left in those areas and are trying their best to prevent these fires. So we've chosen to raise specifically to help the firefighters, and all the money will go to two things. We're going to be supporting buying special vests for the firefighters that are actually running into these fires and trying to put out these fires. So special vests, each vest costs 4,500 Rand. And we've committed to Kakal in Israel that we as a South African Jewish community will try sponsor 100 vests for additional firefighters so that they can stop these fires. And for bigger donations, the Kakal has asked for mobile firefighting units, which are sort of pumps with water that can be put on trucks. They haven't got enough the firefighting trucks for the fire. They've had to innovate with trying to repurpose trucks for that project. And we've committed to raise two of these mobile units of 2,500 Rand each. We've already managed to raise one mobile firefighting unit, which we're very proud of. And so we're still looking to raise another 2,500 Rand for another one.
So Mike, if people are able to make a donation on the screen in front of everyone at the moment, there are two things. One is the JNF bank details, which is at Standard Bank, account 300 465 270, and the reference is firefighting. But there are also people who may want to be able to make a donation through their credit card. And what they need to do is they need to pick up their cell phones and they need to point it towards the screen and they need to turn on their cameras. And if you can turn on your camera and you point it at what they call a 3D barcode, over there, it will just open up a PayFast link and people will be able to actually make a donation using their credit card for the JNF. And it gives you an option if you'd like to donate 100 Rand, 500 Rand, 250, 1,000 Rand, or your own amount. So if you are able to, if you are in a position to help support the firefighting teams who've been putting out blazes caused by Hezbollah rockets in the north of Israel, then please take a moment, put your camera pointed towards the screen to that barcode that you see on the screen over there, and it will open up the PayFast link and you'll be able to make a donation through to the JNF and help the firefighting that has been caused. Michael, give us the amount again of how much of the north of Israel has been burnt by the fires created by Hezbollah.
6,000 hectares. There have been over 122 fires in Israel, and most of those have happened in the last few weeks. So the firefighting divisions are really overwhelmed. And if the war escalates and there is the type of full-on conflagration that Miri's talking about, that situation will be much, much worse and they'll need more support.
So also, if people would like to make a donation tomorrow into your Standard Bank account for the Jewish National Fund, they're able to take a photograph of the bank account details. And I'm going to ask Dylan to also post it into the chat on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Zoom as well. So people will be able to make a donation as well. So Mike, a huge thank you to the JNF for everything that you're doing and allowing us the opportunity to try help Israel at this enormously difficult time. So the bank details Dylan is posting at the moment. But Miri, welcome back. And I'm going to ask Michael to stay with us as well, because Michael, you've been going through a lot of the questions and the comments that people have been posting across all of the channels. And if you have a question or a comment, please use the chat section of Zoom or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube now and post your question, or use the Q&A section. I see there are 26 questions that have already arrived in the last few minutes. Miri, I hope you don't plan on sleeping tonight. We'll try to be reasonable.
We're going to enjoy this on all sides of the world. Okay, hit me with them.
So I want to start, if I can, first of all, you mentioned countries that have a close relationship with Iran, and South Africa is one of those countries. We see the South African former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Naledi Pandor, her first visit after the 7th of October was to Iran. She called Hamas, according to Hamas, to congratulate them on the success of the Al-Aqsa flood attack on Israel. We know that South Africa has been used as a proxy of Iran in return for money to fund the African National Congress and its election campaign. South Africa has been willing to become a proxy of Iran itself to, number one, protect Iran at the International Atomic Energy Agency, number two, to expand BRICS to allow Iran into a coalition and in some of its isolation, and number three, to get South Africa's full backing and support, and we believe for Iran to train, in fact, operatives in South Africa as well. What can you tell us, if anything, about the relationship between countries like South Africa and the Islamic Republic of Iran?
So it's clear to everybody that this is both a touchy subject and one that we need to look at in the face. International communities have diplomatic ties with lots of countries. And I say that because it isn't that Iran is isolated the way that North Korea is. I think it should be, but it's not. And in that sense, meaning it has not, Iran has managed to avoid being a pariah country. And I want to call it out. I want to call us all out. I want us to take note that the Islamic regime is not the Persian-speaking culture that we know of 2,500 years. And what the Islamic regime has done, and one of the most successful portions of what they've done, is in using the social media platform for information warfare, in the sense that they amplify voices that are horrifically anti-everything that I think all of us stand for. I have entire lectures that I give about the aspect of how successful they are. And in that sense, I think that they make an impact, especially in the terminology and the framing in places both like South Africa and other ones, where they call that they're talking, because the Shiites really do think, Howard, that they are the oppressed people in the world. They really do think that. And because of that, the aspect of oppressed people and being against the oppressor, about talking about in that type of terminology, talking about justice and talking about different Islamic values. And again, I'm not against Islam, but this is about the Islamic regime of Iran. They managed to do it hand in hand with a military industry that gives them an income, with the export of oil that gives them an income, with the exports that they can do of weaponry to countries like Russia or China, or their dialogue with North Korea. And so that we're in this place where we mistakenly, because I'm all for the people of Iran, just like I can be all for Palestinian people. But Hamas is a genocidal terror organization. And the Islamic regime of Iran not only supplies ideas and money, but it goes in stages. When we talk about the aspect of terrorism and how things like this can be exported, how Iran exports terror, it doesn't come in and say, hi, we're going to do the terrorism. It starts by finding different allies, and those allies can be bought, they can be on terminology, and from that ideology, they supply them not just with capabilities and means, but also with training. And that's what we're seeing worldwide. It's something that's happened in Central and South America. It happened extensively in different countries in Asia. Don't let it happen in South Africa. It is a scary thing, and it's something that can be pointed out, and I highly recommend taking note at ICT, the Institute for Counter-Terrorism, that I've run for the last 9 months. We've been doing extensive work looking at the Iranian money flow, including towards South Africa. Take note, it's very worthwhile to dive into it.
Mike, do you want to jump in with a question, or?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ehud. Miri, on the Lebanon side, there have been quite a lot of questions. One from an anonymous Israeli viewer to ask, should they be getting generators, and if the electricity grid is going to be hit, what do you recommend? We've got lots
It's
of
really what I think is that, hi everybody, I'm in Israel. I live in in the greater Tel Aviv area, and I asked that question to myself: should I go and buy a generator? So I have not bought a generator, and I'm saying that because at the end, I think that a hard week is something that we can handle. And when I say a hard week, it's not that there won't be electricity for the entire week, because the issue of the generator is the one mainly like that. But I do think that there are going to be missiles that will get through, and there are going to be casualties closer to the greater Tel Aviv area than we've seen in the past. I would say that it's always correct inside Israel, certainly in the last 9 months, to be prepared for the extra little things, which is called the 6 bottles of water. There's like a list that the home front always gives. But no, I didn't buy a generator.
But you did buy a battery-operated radio.
I actually own one, and I've always owned one. Hey, I read all of the EMP, sci-fi, end of the world kind of books, so those who know what I'm talking about, and I don't have a kit the way that they do there. But yes, you want to have a radio because you want to be able to have that information. And it doesn't matter if your phone isn't working for an hour or even for 24 hours. We're so used to it that you want to have the information. And all you need is, few batteries and an old-fashioned radio.
I see a few people have asked the question about nuclear warfare. Is nuclear off the table at this point in time?
Nuclear warfare is a completely different arena. And when we say nuclear warfare, it's not actually about the warfare, it's about nuclear deterrence. Let's everybody get this straight. Nuclear bombs were used once in history on 2 days against Japan, and they've never been used since. And what developed was nuclear deterrence. So the question is, if Iran goes nuclear, what that does, because when you have nuclear capability, it's not about using the nukes. You use the nukes, it's the end of the world. It's what that capability that you have the nukes gives you. And just look at Russia. Look at what Russia has done, not just against Ukraine and I mean the Crimean War, the Crimean War in 2014, against Georgia and different areas. When you have nuclear bombs, you can threaten to use them, that's in deterrence, and then do all sorts of actions, and everybody's kind of scared. So I do not think right now that we're talking about a nuclear war. I do think that the possibility, I think I'll say otherwise, that Iran almost already has the benefits of nuclear deterrence, of as if being a nuclear power without being a nuclear power. And that's terrible. That bites into what I was saying before about Iran and the Islamic regime and what they want to do and what they supply and how they impact. And that's not good news for the world.
Mike, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Another question that was asked about the war in the north, Miri, is this a war that we can fight from the air, or will it require boots on the ground? Will we have to put our soldiers at risk, similar to what's happened in Gaza?
Soldiers are protection and defense. It's not about putting soldiers at risk. Soldiers are there to protect the citizens of the state. As I said, all four of mine are serving right now. And in its own way, I don't want to put anybody at risk, but at the end, it's going to be the trained soldiers who are the ones who are going to be able to fight that war. This is not an air war. To be able to destroy Hezbollah capabilities, same as to destroy Hamas capabilities in the Gaza Strip, it takes boots on the ground. In Lebanon, yes, that would definitely be a part of it.
There have been a few questions about Joe Biden, about Vladimir Putin, and about Netanyahu. So maybe we can touch on all three of them at the same time. There's certainly a spat at the moment between Netanyahu and the Biden administration. How serious is that? What does Vladimir Putin actually want? And then let's talk about the future of the current Israeli Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu.
I really appreciate that question. And to whoever asked it, really, you think that I know what Vladimir Putin wants? But okay, I'll try and give some kind of an answer in that sense. And again, that's me and my sense of humor. I appreciate all of the questions. The United States is a superpower. Russia thinks that it's a superpower. Israel is not a superpower. And I greatly appreciate everybody putting us all on the exact same level. We're not on the same level. Israel, 2024 is supposed to pass 10 million people. What are you in South Africa? 45 million, 50 million? 60, okay? Just remember to compare every once in a while. Israel, all of Israel is 10 million people. If you add in the Palestinians in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip, all of that together only arrives at 15 million people. We are a small country in the mid-range in that sense, and we have a lot of security challenges. We are a democracy. We are with warts and pimples, and I would go so far as to say that lovely South Africa is a democracy with warts and pimples, and the United States of America is a democracy with warts and pimples. And I say it in that terms, there is no such thing as a perfect democracy. There are different types of democracies, and leaders don't always get along. Having said all of that, I'm not trying to avoid the question. The Prime Minister of Israel has been, for many, many years, in a very challenging relationship with the United States of America, where I think that he specifically, this prime minister, I'm not saying he brought it on himself, but he certainly has not stopped it. And he himself has become very partisan. He talks to the Republicans, and as such, the Democrats don't like him. And he's the prime minister. I'm not the prime minister. I will remind you that there was a president before Biden who had very choice words to say about the Israeli prime minister, President Obama. And it's not that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu had the best of relationships, but in general, they are both similar type of leaders, similar types that I can see the equivalence, both in the United Kingdom and in France and in different European countries. And it's funny how nobody ever, it's like compare to different things. So you don't always get along. I think that right now, Israel is going through enormous domestic challenges that in 2023, we pretty much thought in Israel that it was a terrible year, and that's before October 7th. I just want to remind you. Our 75th anniversary did not look the way we expected for domestic reasons. And it doesn't matter which side of the map we're on in the sense of how we view the future of Israel, but the government itself reaches out, I think, to governments that they feel more comfortable with. And that's where we are right now. I can see that, at the end, we have what I would define as a right-wing conservative government. Doesn't matter if you support it or not. And that means that right-wing conservative governments in the world have a better relationship with them. So he has a good relationship with India and Modi, and he has a good relationship both with Italy right now, with Austria, it's like, look at it in a broader sense and not in the specifics. I have no idea what Vladimir Putin wants. I'll say one thing. I'm probably the only person in our small, intimate group of thousands of people right now who's actually not just been in the same room with Vladimir Putin, but when I was the Prime Minister's international media advisor under Prime Minister Olmert in 2006-07, I was with the Prime Minister twice in Russia, met Putin twice. He is the only person that I've ever been in a room with of all the world leaders that I've met. And let's not, I'm not the world leader. I was the spokesperson. I was there for my own job. But he is a very, very deterring, scary person. And so in that sense, I think that Russia is Russia and that Vladimir Putin sees himself as Russia. If you sit and listen to the story that he tells, it has to do with Mother Russia and Ukraine never existed. It's all part of Russia. And what he wants to be is the world power that he thinks that he should be. I'm not here to resolve Vladimir Putin's problems. From the Israeli perspective, I'll remind us all that 1 in 6 Israelis' native tongue is Russian. And I say that because we're edging into 10 million. And from 1989 to 1997, 1 million Russian-speaking Soviet Jews immigrated to Israel. A lot of them, half of them were probably from the Ukraine. But when they came at that stage, it wasn't yet with the Ukrainian identity. It was still with that Russian-speaking identity. We do have a very big Russian diaspora. It's not a diaspora, but it's part of who we are. It's part of our government. It's part of our parties. So we have a dialogue there. We still have diplomatic ties with Russia. We still have direct flights to Moscow. So life is complicated. We didn't disconnect ties with Russia. And yes, that's where we are right now. I don't have a better answer than that.
And with Biden himself?
President Biden is probably the most Zionist supporter of Israel that I ever have heard of. That doesn't mean he's going to get along with our Israeli prime minister. The Israeli prime minister is a very charismatic man, but he doesn't seem to get along as well with Democrats at the moment. And yes, there's a spat going on. As we speak right now, the Israeli defense minister, who's in the prime minister's party, is in the United States. He's meeting with the American Defense Secretary and with the Secretary of State. And so again, I try to take notice of actions and not necessarily of the rhetoric. And that doesn't make it any easier right now, because I really do think that the biggest challenge right now for me as an Israeli is not President Biden, let alone Putin, and Prime Minister Netanyahu. My problem as an Israeli is that there's a younger generation, not Biden, older generation, a younger generation that think that I, Israel, am white, colonial, usurper, oppressor, worst country on earth. And that is something that needs to change. And that's not about Biden.
Michael, we have to let Miri go in approximately 5 minutes. So I'm going to allow you one last question, and then I'm going to ask if it's possible that we end on maybe a positive note in my final question as well. So, Mike, which of the audience's questions do you want to throw at Miri now?
Miri, I think a lot of people, you touched briefly on it, but people are asking questions about the domestic situation in Israel, the rising protests against the government, guns leaving the government. Will the government be able to survive? And if there's another election, who will be the next prime minister of Israel? And how does that affect the war, both in Gaza and in the north?
So it's wonderful questions, and I don't have answers. And I think that we all want to have clear-cut answers. I don't know South African politics. I live here. I want to remind you, we had elections in 2019, in 2020, in 2021, and in 2022. I mean, do me a favor. We've had more elections than you can imagine. So when there are elections, again, because there will be elections at some stage, either full term of this government or not, it's hard to say who will be there. Has to do with Israeli demographics. There's no clear-cut figure in Israel right now that is a clear-cut leader figure that I would say that's the next prime minister. And I'll just remind everybody, we do not vote for the prime minister. In Israel, we vote for political parties, and it is the head of the parties that are the projected leaders. And right now, Netanyahu is still, with the war and everything going on, still the strongest leader inside Israel. There are their names, you all know them, between Lapid and Gantz, if Bennett would come back, but it's very hard to tell. And yes, it does impact the war, but when I say it impacts that, it mainly, when you have a government that it's perceived as being bickering among itself, it doesn't make your citizens feel the best about the decisions that they're making when it comes to war. So let's, I mean, I'm most definitely one of those that wants to hear all of the voices inside Israel, and we're definitely in challenging times. 2023 was challenging domestically, that's still there. We're trying to fight a war with those domestic challenges, and we're going to go forward. We will do so.
Miri, you've been so generous with all of your time. You really have been, and you've given us such amazing insight and views that I think have given a lot of us so much to think about. So as I ask my final question, I'm going to ask everyone who's watched us this evening, just maybe to take a moment and leave you a message on the chat section of Zoom, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube, because you've been really so insightful in the way that you've dealt with all of these problems. So I want to talk about the earthquake that happened on the 7th of October, and with any change comes opportunity. Can you be optimistic? And if you project a year or two into the future, will we look back and say, we managed to grab the best from this terrible opportunity, this terrible time we've been through, and we've managed to reshape Israel, reshape the Middle East, get rid of our enemies? Is there an opportunity now? What are the opportunities that await for us when the fog of war has lifted?
I want to remind you all of Israel 2024. In 1948, could anybody have thought that Israel would be where it was in 1958, a decade where 1.5 million Jews came, immigrated, integrated into the state of Israel? In 1958, could you have imagined 1968 after the Six-Day War? Are you kidding me? In 1968, would you have believed that in 1978 you were about to sign a peace treaty with Egypt that had fought 5 bloody wars against Israel? In 1978, could you believe that a decade later the Israeli economy would take off into startup nation? In 1988, would we have believed that 1 million Russian-speaking Jews, that hundreds of thousands of Ethiopian Jews would have immigrated to Israel and be part of Israeli society? Look at Israel through decades. Don't look at it through October 7th and the day after. All of the different aspects of what was happening last year domestically, that's part of our demographics and part of our growth and part of our changing and part of our being part of the world. Is it nice and easy? It's not nice and easy anywhere in the world. But as you said, Howard, and I very much connect to that, war is horrible. War is also about change and opportunity. There is always change after war. And what I'm saying inside domestic Israeli society is that Startup Nation is turning into what it did since October 7th. It's taking care of us because we need it. We are a country terrorized, trauma, in war, fighting war, isolated, and we're trying to work within ourselves, and that's good. That's where we need to be. But in a connection, talking like this with this amazing audience overseas, let's make the opportunity and the change and the ongoing something that we do together, because we will make it better. Every decade, we make it better. And that's the decade that we're in now as well.
Miri Eisen, it's been such a privilege and such an honor to be able to spend this evening with you. I'm wearing my Bring Them Home Now t-shirt now. There are still over 130 hostages being held by Hamas. It has to be our priority to get them home. Every Israeli life, Jew, Christian, Druze, Muslim, is absolutely sacred and important to us. That has to be our priority. They need to come home safely and freely. Miri, thank you so much for your generosity, your time, and your amazing insight. Mike,
Thank you so much.
Mike, if you don't mind, I'm going to share the details again for people who want to make a donation through to the JNF, to the Firefighting. We can talk over the screen for another message. Don't forget to please leave us a thank you message for Miri. Miri, I will copy all of these and send them through to you, because I think it is so heartwarming to see the amazing response that our audience have received for you this evening. So to everyone
Thank you so much. So I'm going to say Laila Tov from Jerusalem, from Tel Aviv, V'Laila Tov, V'Toda, Toda.
Laila Tov to you, and may your family remain completely safe as well. Miri, thank you so much.
Toda, Laila Tov.
Laila Tov, Miri.
And Mike, shall we tell you some of the other webinars that we're busy working on at the moment?
Oh, great. Next.
Are you old enough to have remembered a movie called A Lollipop?
No.
50 years ago, South Africa was absolutely taken by a remarkable movie called A Lollipop, a friendship of a little white kid and a little black kid. It was a tearjerker, sobber. 50 years later, we've tracked down the producer. We are going to be showing and screening A Lollipop to our audience and meeting the producer, who today lives in Israel. The kid, the little black kid who was 8 years old at the time, is now 58 years old. We've tracked him down as well. And so we're going to be broadcasting that in the not too distant future. We're also going to be doing an amazing webinar with Shurat Hadin, the group of lawyers who actually bring justice to the victims of terror around the world. We're going to be doing a webinar with them, and we've secured the rights from Sheryl Sandberg. Sheryl Sandberg, you will know, she was Chief Operating Officer of Facebook, and she's done this remarkable documentary on the abuse of women on the 7th of October. And she's given us the rights to broadcast her documentary that we're going to be showing to our audience as well. So we've got an amazing few webinars that will be coming up over the next month. Mike, what do you think?
Sounds great. Very interesting. Going to keep us at home and busy during these cold winter months.
The cold winter nights, you need something to do besides snuggling under the blankets, although I think so many people watch us under the blankets. So just tell us in our last few moments, just tell us exactly the money we're raising tonight. Why is it needed for firefighters in Israel? Just explain the problem to us, and the problem, hopefully, that we can help solve.
Thanks, Howard. So Hezbollah has been firing thousands of rockets at the communities in northern Israel. Over 6,000 hectares of land have gone up in flames, and there have been over 120 fires in the last few months in the north of Israel. And Israel's firefighting capability has been overwhelmed by this, and we really need to support them. They've asked us for vests to help, special vests that the firefighters can go closer to the fire and be able to put them out, as well as mobile firefighting units that can help to repurpose trucks so that they're able to expand the number of vehicles they have to take on the massive number of fires that they really are not actually prepared to handle.
Amazing. So if you are able to please either take down the JNF South Africa bank details on the screen now, or alternatively point your camera at the barcode and it will open up a little page that will allow you to make a donation through your credit card details as well. So a huge thank you to everyone who's joined us this evening. We had an absolute massive audience tonight, and we look forward to having you on a webinar again very soon. So to everyone, please stay warm. For those people who've joined us from around the world, it's been such a privilege and such a pleasure to have all of you on board tonight. Michael, thank you for co-hosting this with us. Really appreciate it. And congratulations to the JNF for the amazing work that you and your team do. You and Bev have been absolutely inspirational for our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for all the support, and thanks to everybody.
Good night, everyone. Cheers. Good night.